Welcome to Check Your Math, where our goal is to understand a formula to sustain balance as you scale your growth. So, the reason I'm talking about checking your math is because I'm talking to directors and leaders of teams. The high capacity people who find themselves responsible not just for themselves, but for most other people. You have responsibilities, and at the end of the day, you just want to be able to get all your stuff done without running out of time or energy. You want to be able to enjoy growth without the fear of also being overconsumed by an imbalanced life. So, in business, whenever we want to understand why something isn't going the way we think it should, the first thing we should be looking at is the data to see if the math can make sense. It's funny because I never would have thought that I would grow to love and appreciate math the way that I do. You definitely could not have told me that when I was in the 10th grade. So, do you remember story problems where they would say, Susie rode a bus and she was traveling at X speed, and what time will Susie arrive? So forth and so on. Now, having only maybe 14 to 15 years of experience of life at that time, story problems really felt trivial to me, to say the least. They felt just completely irrelevant to the life that I was going to live. But now that I've had obviously many more years of life experience and story problems that I've lived through and problems that I've needed to solve, I have come to have a much deeper appreciation and understanding for just how applicable math really is in helping me to navigate through life. So, when your life really isn't adding up to what you think it should, this is the formula that I want you to use to check your math. Okay. So we've all heard of the saying that two halves make a whole. Yes, in addition. But we're going to talk about multiplication and division. Why? Because if you multiply 1 by 1, you get 1. If you divide 1 by 1, you get 1. But the problem is, many of us are trying to add with other people and we're coming up short. And that's because if you multiply zero point 0.5 by zero point 0.5, you'll actually end up with 0.25, which is less than what you started with. Why is that? Because the more you give when you're not whole, when you're trying to receive and they're not whole, you end up giving from a half empty cup and you do end up with less than what you started with. And I know many of you can understand exactly what I'm saying. And ultimately, the math is not mathing, okay? It's not math that makes sense for a balanced, sustainable, or satisfying life. Now, what I love about this concept is that you can multiply or divide 1 into infinity and still end up with a positive number. Because the truth of the matter is, we are creators and we have endless and ultimate potential for infinite capacity to grow, to scale in any direction we desire, as long as we learn how to balance the numbers. When we can make it make mathematical sense, because things are simple, we just make them feel complicated. Okay. But I'm going to break down the simplicity of it so that we can get out of our own way and we can get back to the basics. And that way we can get around to doing everything that is important to us without running out of time or energy. Let me introduce you to the concept called the iron triangle. So, the iron triangle in project management specifically refers to the interconnected bond that always constrains or interconnects any project. Okay, so remember, a project has a beginning, it has an end, and it has objectives that you're planning to meet in between, i.e., life. Life is a project, and everything in life that we ever attempt to do, whether it is in our home or in our business, it can be divided down into its most common denominator of being a project. So the iron triangle is really, really helpful to know because if you are, if your life is basically not adding up to what you want it to in either of those places, the problem can be identified somewhere within the iron triangle. So let's look at the pieces. You have scope, you have time, and you have budget. So what is that? Scope is the requirement. It is everything that is required or needed to achieve your goals in life or in business. Time is time. Okay. And budget. I want to be very clear that yes, this does relate to your financial resources, but it also relates to your energetic resources. The physical form has to execute. Okay. So when I talk about budget, I am specifically referring to both financial resources and energetic resources. So what this is saying is that the combination of your budget and your time and your scope working together will always relate to and produce the level of quality of the outcome. Now, the question is, do you have the ability to know when to multiply or divide your own capacity in order to meet those requirements and the needs of your outcomes? If the answer is not a resounding yes, which is truthfully the case for most people, this course is really going to help you. Let me break down the formula of the iron triangle. Essentially, you have time, which is your relationship with time and the value that you can extract out of your time, then multiplied by your budget, i.e., your financial resources, your energetic resources. Those equal your capacity, what you're able to do. Okay. So now your budget multiplied by your time equals your capacity. Here is the key: capacity must be greater than or equal to your scope or all of the things you're trying to accomplish. And I'm going to get really specific on how I define scope as a professional, as someone who is both a contributor in teams and also a leader of many teams. How do I define scope? The cool thing about project management is that not only does it kind of give us formulas and frameworks in which to view and think about life and business, but it also gives us tools and practices that once you master them, once you start to apply them, not only are you able to identify when you're out of balance, when you have imbalances, the way you're working, right? But then how to go about rebalancing them. So let's define scope. Now, I am a business owner. I am also a consultant. I am an educator. I am a mother. I am a wife. I have many, many, many roles in my life. So, the first thing that I think is important to know is when you're thinking about scope, it is from the perspective of you as a whole person. Hear me. Now, I'm going to speak to the millennials right now because as a millennial, we have the tendency to define our entire identity by our profession, what we do for a living. And then whatever's left over, we give to our family or our personal goals or ambitions. And then we wonder why we can never get enough of it done. And the things that are most sacred or important to us go undone. So it's really important to think about scope from the totality of who you are. So I like to ask myself, what are the teams I'm part of? What teams do I lead? So from that perspective, I think about my nucleus, my nuclear family, okay? My children, my husband, my mother-in-law, my daughters. That is a very specific team. I think about my friend group, which is a team. Okay. I've had the same friends for 10, 15, and 20 years on purpose because I'm very intentional about who I like to grow with. My sorority, Delta Sigma Theta, is a team that I am a part of. Okay. When it comes to my profession and the work that I get paid to do, I have many teams there as well. I lead about 3 different ones through Coastal Cloud. I also have teams for Hive over Matter. So you get the point. It's really important to step back and think about who are the groups of people that you are intentionally connected with across your life and what is the alignment of their collective goals, right? The shared objectives, and the priorities that they have, because essentially your who, your what, and your why defines your holistic scope. Okay. Now, the reality is when you're in a team, those teams should be working together toward shared and equitable priorities. Because anytime you find yourself in an experience where you are contributing to one of those teams where there is inequity or misalignment of priorities, you're going to experience disconnection. You're going to experience signs of a broken triangle. If you're in a relationship with individuals or priorities that are not aligned with who you truly are or desire to be, your most authentic self, you are absolutely going to experience signs of disconnectedness, like frustration, pain, and exhaustion. And why? Because the formula that you're functioning in is that your capacity is less than your scope. This is something that is very familiar to many of us. Essentially, you're trying to do too much. Okay. You're doing more than what your budget and your time actually allows for. And that is why you find yourself exhausted or burning down or you're on your mental or financial energy more quickly. So the question becomes, are you in control? Do you check your own math? Do you take the time not just to recognize the signs and the symptoms of I'm frustrated, I'm not creating the results that I want to see in my life or in my business, I'm not able to scale the team in the way that I thought I could, right? Like not just noticing those signs and symptoms, but when you notice them, what is your default? What do you choose to do? Do you, A, consider the external factors that are happening all around you and essentially place the blame on them? Or do you, B, have a practice of checking your math so you know when to multiply and when to divide from people, from practices, from places, so that you can renew and exchange the value in those relationships? If not, let me tell you how to reset your capacity if you find yourself in a lopsided triangle. When it comes to time, you want to have a relationship with time that allows you to pause it at will. Okay. You want to be able to pause it when necessary so that you can redirect it where it needs to go, especially when you find that the current direction of it is not serving you. From the perspective of budget, you want to have an awareness, and this is so key. You want to have an awareness of the things that restore your energy and your finances so that you can engage those respective activities whenever you feel like you are draining out or you're losing. And this does feel hard for a lot of people because often people don't think about what makes them feel good, right? Because it's just easier to think about what causes them pain. If I were to ask you to list 50 things that restore your mental, spiritual, emotional, financial energy, may have crickets. But there is a good reason for this. Okay. Simple math feels hard because when you start to think about it, you're confronted with all of the problems from all of the stories you've learned to believe. The ones that you tell yourself that you can't or you shouldn't trust yourself. Those stories that make you hesitant to dream or cause fear of not sticking with it and the fear of disappointing yourself. And this is a reality for many people. And because it is a reality, many do not stop to really consider what brings them joy, what recharges them, for fear of not being able to follow through in the first place. But knowing how to reset your capacity, I'm going to tell you what that means. It means that you can shift your relationship with time where and when it is necessary. You can shift your relationship with the activities that restore you because the brain is a calculator and it will perform the function that you direct it to when you give it the right inputs. So you will know that you can successfully manage your own capacity through this course because I'm going to show you exactly how as it relates to time, budget, and scope. When it comes to time, you'll know that you could successfully manage your capacity when you can estimate the amount of time that it takes you to complete a task. Okay. Now, that's a major thing Have you ever asked someone or been asked, so how long do you think it'll take you to do that? Crickets. It's like I cussed them out. Okay. Like, I don't know. I have no idea. And it's often freaks people out because they don't monitor how they do things. And so because you don't necessarily know how you get to an end, it's hard for you to estimate how long that takes. Um, but if that freaks you out, that's an area of opportunity because it absolutely doesn't have to. I'm going to show you, and I'll show you throughout the course of this process together how. Another thing is when you can pause and reclaim time as needed. So I mentioned that earlier. All right. This is definitely a hint that you know how to manage your own capacity. The third thing related to time is you can plan and delegate effectively. This is important. Oh my God, this is so important. So, being able to delegate effectively is a power move that we're going to focus on. So, let's talk about budget. You know that you can manage your capacity when you can measure the income, the comings ins, and the goings outs of both your financial and your energetic resources. So, do you keep a financial budget? Right? Do you know your area and do you have an energetic budget? There is an energetic budget, guys. I'm going to show you how to create one because having one allows you to know how to reallocate your resources to drive value when needed. So, when you can recognize that a resource is actually acting more like a deficit in a relationship that is draining and draining faster than it is restoring, then you know when to reallocate it. Um, Increasing your capacity and then coming back together to multiply is also just, it's a key, that you're going to learn. The other thing is, can you measure your ROI? What is the return on the investments you are giving mentally, spiritually, energetically, financially, right? These are all hints to know you can manage your capacity. Now, let's talk about scope. Scope matters because you don't want to be in a situation where you think your life is being decided for you by other people, where you think everything that you're giving your time and energy to is outside of your hands, that you have to do it because someone is forcing you to do it. Because the reality is, no, they're not. You are doing it. Everything that you're giving your time and your energy to in some way, shape, or form, you believe to serve you. Now, there may feel like there's some contradictions there. And this is why this uh, iron triangle is going to be so valuable in helping you to find that out. But it starts with ownership. Okay. You get to be a whole and autonomous being when you decide to own your energy and your time in a way that directs it toward what you want it to do. But when you don't have the practice or the skill set or the ability to control your own capacity, then yeah, guess what? Someone is going to do it for you because energy is never destroyed. It is only transferred. And so if you don't take the ownership to do it yourself, please and believe someone will do it for you. When it comes to scope, being able to identify when to multiply, when to divide the assets that are deficits and where you're giving your time, where you're giving your energy to, that matters. Okay. Is your practice of prioritization effective and efficient and inclusive of a holistic version of yourself? And do you make decisions? Right? Because I'm going to tell you what, making decisions is the seat of power and is also the driver of the direction you're going to go into. So just, period. Okay. Now, if you don't remember anything that I've said today, I want you to remember this. I want you to remember to create the change that you want to see and to have the capacity to sustain it. You need to be both autonomous and intentionally connected. Autonomous, whole, one, fully in control of where it is you are going and how you're showing up, and then intentionally connected to others who are showing up in the same way. Number two, if you are experiencing signs of burnout or frustration, just know Oh, my math isn't mathing. I can get back to the basics. And I want you to reference the resources and the frameworks that I'm going to share throughout this course. Specifically, check your formula, i.e., budget times time is your capacity. And your capacity should always be greater than or equal to your scope. And if you are able to manage your own capacity, you get to direct growth and you get to control your reality no matter what anyone else is doing. And that is real strength. So, this is what I want you to do. You have a number of assessments in the course. Specifically, I want you to focus on the whole self assessment and the welcome survey. These are two that I've shaped personally that I want you to start with. I also recommend that you take the Strength Finders assessment and the Myers Briggs type indicator. These two were game changers for me personally. The Strength Finders assessment helped me to see my natural occurrences, my natural behaviors from a completely different perspective. We often try to approach change from a deficit because we think something is wrong with us, or we don't necessarily see our strengths because they are that natural to us. So, this was a huge eye opener for me when I actually learned that many of the habits that had stories that made me thinking that they were weaknesses actually turned out to be my strengths. And since then, I've doubled down on them and completely shifted how I show up. The Myers Briggs type indicator I really love as well because it gives insight into your energetic replenishing, whether you're an extrovert or introvert, and knowing what are the things that restore you naturally, not just based off of the narratives and the dominant stories of how we think we need to show up, but really being able to show up in a way that is natural and normal to us and that feels good. So I want you to take these and go on to the next session, and I will see you in the next lesson. Thanks.